everybody, this is Emma. I am back to the stage of trying to figure out a decent place in my 8x10 soapbox of a room to film. So that's why I'm back up on my bed. I'm trying to find a place where the lighting isn't terrible, which is very difficult in such a small room where my window is mostly blocked by trees that I'm sure are very nice. They're just not very helpful to me right now. So let me know if the lighting sucks in the comments. Actually, you know what? You probably don't need to because I probably already will know. But regardless of whether or not the lighting's decent, I promise that I will deliver to you some at least very decent book content. You know what, let's just get to the thing. So anyway, I am here to talk to you about something that I've been seeing going around on BookTube a lot, being that it's June, and that is the mid-year book freakout tag. Now, I'm something of a purist, so that's why I decided to not do this tag until late June at the very least. It'll be July by the time it's actually up. I know some people have been doing it in early June, but you're supposed to do it for the first half of the year, and the first exact half of the year is January 1st to June 30th. So why would you skimp out on poor little June over here, right? Hopefully this will be pretty quick. I'm just gonna go through the tag, tell you a little bit about each prompt and what book I have that fits it. Don't worry, you'll be out of here soon. Prompt number 1, the best book you've read so far this year. I don't think this should come as a shock to anybody who's been watching me since at least February, but the best book I've read so far this year is Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. I made an entire video, it's only like 4 minutes long, but I was reenacting my fragile emotional state while listening to / reading this book, and I will probably link it in the description below. Please be kind, it's a bit rough, but my emotions regarding this book are still very real. This is a good book that you should read if you enjoy solid character development, if you enjoy strong world building from a world that isn't necessarily just white medieval Europe. If you like good writing that isn't necessarily flowery but is very powerful and suspenseful. If you enjoy a plot that isn't always incredibly fast-paced but does keep going throughout the story and have a lot of different and complex facets to it. And of course, if you like LGBTQ+ representation, that feels like a natural part of the story. It isn't just like, oh, this is too straight, I need to put something in here so the gays won't get mad at me. I gotta stop now or I'll be talking for like 20 more minutes, so let's move on to the next prompt. Best sequel you've read so far this year. All the sequels I've read this year have been bad. Okay, that's not quite fair. I think I'm going to say the best sequel I've completed so far this year would be The Princess and the Fangirl by Ashley Poston. This is a little bit cheating because it's not quite a sequel, it's really more of a companion book. The characters from book 1 do show up, but they don't have a super significant role. But I think it's close enough to a sequel that I can count it. Also, I only gave it 3 stars, and I actually said in my review that it probably deserved lower than that. I really enjoyed the Comic-Con-like setting. It was really fun to be able to spend an entire book at ExcelsiCon, which is the convention in the book for fans of Starfield, which is a Star Trek-like TV show that the author came up with as the setting for the book. However, I didn't think the storylines were balanced super well. There was just too much going on. 2 different coming-of-age type stories, 2 different romances, and also neither of the narrators really did it for me until almost halfway through the book. But every other sequel I've read so far this year has been worse. So that's why this is the best one. I am, however, about a third of the way through listening to Hank Green's A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor, and so far, if the rest of the book is like that first third, it is going to be better than The Princess and the Fangirl. So if I could list something I hadn't completed yet, I would probably list that one. New release you haven't read yet but want to. That would be Winterkeep by Kristen Cashore. It's the latest. Is it Cashore or Cashore? Oh my god, I gotta look this up now. No! I'm sorry, I'm balancing my phone on a stuffed lion, so it's gonna be a little bit shaky, but I don't have anything else up here in my bed right now, so it'd be like that. Okay, I got it now. Winterkeep by Kristen Cashore. It's the latest book in the Graceling series. There's about a 10-year gap between the 3rd book, Bitter Blue, and this one. The Graceling series was a pretty significant part of my adolescence. I remember making friends with one of my best friends in high school because we were both having to staff a band event, and we just started talking about Fire, which we had both finished. That turned into like an hour-and-a-half conversation about that book. So I am excited to read the book just because I want to know what happens next in that universe. Unfortunately, I haven't heard the greatest things about it. For those of you who don't know, and when I do read it, I'm planning to do a series recap on the Graceling series, but just really quickly, the Graceling series is about people who are born with two different colored eyes, and that means that they have some special ability. It can be like super speed, it could be understanding a bunch of languages, or it could be something more dramatic. The protagonist has a grace for killing. And then the next two books are companion books that are set in the same world and have some of the same characters, but they're not really direct sequels. I'm not really sure what they're going to do with Winterkeep. I think that Bitterblue, who was the protagonist in, obviously, Bitterblue, is going to at least make an appearance in this book, if not be one of the main characters. But I think there might be some other characters too, I'm not really sure. And even though it might not be very good, I'm still excited to read it. Most anticipated to release for the second half of the year. So here's the thing, I haven't really been following new releases recently, except for a series that I have been following since I was a kid. So I really can't think of many authors that are coming out with something new that I really want to read. However, one that I'm interested in reading, just because I have read and enjoyed books by this author before, is A Spindle Splintered by Alex E. Harrow. Alex E. Harrow wrote both The Once and Future Witches, which was the first book I read at the beginning of this year, and also, I can't believe I almost forgot this title, The 10,000 Doors of January, which I read at the end of 2019, I think, and I really loved. The Once and Future Witches was, like, fine. Like, there was nothing really outstanding about it either way. So even if this book is, like, the average of those two, I would be pretty happy with that. Honestly, if it were just okay, I would be fine with that as well. It seems like it's about sort of a modern-day Sleeping Beauty where a young woman who has a genetic condition that causes most people who have it to die before age 21 is about to turn 21. And so her friend has like a special present for her, which seems to be like some sort of like time traveling kind of thing. I am not really sure. They hop in and out of different fairy tales or something like that. I thought it sounded interesting, and of course I like the author already, so there you go. Biggest disappointment. Okay. This is not necessarily going to be the worst book I read in the first half of the year, simply the one that was the most disappointing to me. They're two quite different things. If you're expecting a book to not be super good anyway and then it isn't, that's one thing, but if you're really hyped for something and then it turns out to be just like a pile of trash, then that really sucks. So the book that I was most disappointed in, or at least the two books I should say, are Sleepless Volumes 1 and 2 by Sarah Vaughan. I was so excited for these. I had heard fantastic things about these comics, and I actually thought that the series was longer than just two books. I didn't realize it was only two books, so when I read book 1, I thought it was a pretty good setup for a longer series, even if it wasn't the strongest standalone. And so I gave it like a 3.5 out of 5 or something. Nothing groundbreaking. I wasn't throwing this book at people and demanding that they read it, but you know, it was something. And then when I read the second book, I realized that A, this was the last book in the series, there were no more, and B, absolutely no plot resolution was satisfying, and all of the development we'd seen from previous characters was almost either erased or completely ignored. The art was nice. That's about what I can say here. I'd recommend the books if you just want something fun and visually appealing to read, if you want to read a fantasy that has not just a bunch of white people walking around. I think the protagonist is black, and I think that there's a lot of like diversity scattered throughout the book, which I think is interesting. It's not something they really go into, but I don't think they really need to. The visuals of the kingdom are really cool. I like the details in people's clothes, which seem like they were inspired by a mix of cultures, which I think is interesting. Also, the whole premise of the book is that the royalty in this book has a special order of knights called the Sleepless who vow to never sleep again. And one of the most interesting parts of the book for me was how they explore the Sleepless and what it means to completely forego sleep for the rest of your life, and how some people can't really handle it, and the repercussions that ensue from that. But ultimately, disappointing. Biggest surprise. So I'm interpreting this as like a positive surprise, like something you didn't think you would like, but you did. And that for me is All American Muslim Girl by Nadine Jolie Courtney. I pretty much only picked up this book because it was a book club read for one of my book clubs. I hadn't been reading a lot of young adult books recently. I felt like I had kind of aged out of that category. And I wasn't really sure how the book would be. It sounded like it might be kind of cheesy, and I also thought that, and I also was sort of taken in by the fact that the author looks very white, so I was like, why is this white person writing about a Muslim girl? However, the author is herself Muslim and grew up Muslim, and this is addressed in the novel. The protagonist is also white passing, but grew up culturally Muslim. She's Circassian, and Circassian Muslims are often white passing. I really did enjoy the book. I thought it was quite well written. I liked the character of Allie. I liked her family. I thought they were extremely well drawn, especially both of her parents who have very different relationships with Islam. I also liked her Quran study group that she joins and all of the different conversations she has in there. I thought that those were very nuanced discussions of religion that I wasn't used to seeing in a YA book, and I definitely think there should be more of. So yeah, that one was a very, very pleasant surprise. Favorite new author, either a debut author or a new to you author. So I'm going to go with debut author, and for me that is Chanel Miller, whose debut memoir, Know My Name, I read a couple months ago and was absolutely floored by in every sense. You probably know this by now, but Chanel Miller was the victim of the Brock Turner rape case from, I think, 2016. You've probably read, or at least read bits of her Emily Doe victim impact statement, which if you haven't read all of that, I would highly encourage you to do so. And then just pick up her book and read that too, because it's fabulous. Not only is she able to articulate very well her own experience and what it was like to be in the middle of this very public national rape case, but she's also just an excellent and descriptive writer, and she's able to bring to life her family in such a wonderful way, her friends, her boyfriend, the people she meets on her journey, how far she still has to go, the people who wrote to her and told her that they were encouraged by her story and her bravery. It's really fabulous. You should just read it. Newest fictional crush. So I'm getting to the point where not only do I not really crush on YA love interests anymore, it would be honestly pretty creepy for me to do so. So I can't think of very many fictional crushes because I've been reading a lot of YA recently. Oh, you know what? I think I'm gonna have to say Serapio from Black Sun. So Serapio is one of the 4 protagonists in Black Sun. His people were all murdered during the Night of Knives a long time ago, and so it's his job as the vessel of the Crow God to avenge them and kill the Sun Priest. So that's what he's traveling to the city of Tova to do. Serapio, for most of his life, or at least about most of his adolescence, has been blind because his mother, in the first chapter of the book, blinds him, which is wild and crazy. He's also been made to focus on his destiny for a long time, so he hasn't been able to focus on himself as much, and that's made him simultaneously mature but also inexperienced. And when he travels to Tova, he meets Giala, who's the captain of his ship, and they strike up a friendship, and later a little bit more than a friendship. And there's a lot of really cute moments with him, there's this one scene where Giala is trying to describe how something looks to him, and so she takes his hand and she's tracing a picture. And he actually knows what the sun rising looks like and everything because he's seen it before because he used to be not blind, but he just has this thought well, if I don't tell her, she'll keep holding my hand, and so he just doesn't tell her. And then right before he goes to sleep, he traces the lines that she drew in his palm and he smiles. And this guy is a stone block, he doesn't smile, so it's actually really adorable and wholesome. He's just very steady and a pretty good listener, and he really likes listening to Giala tell stories, and so he asked her to tell all these stories of her people, and he just sits there listening to them, and honestly that sounds great. I would just love to tell somebody fairy tales. So yeah, Serapio. I know, he's unattainable in so many possible ways, but what can I say? Okay, now it's time for my favorite character, and honestly I think my favorite character might be Giala. Giala is a really fun character to spend time in. She's also a protagonist in Black Sun. She was kicked out of her home. She's Teak. She comes from an island that is populated exclusively by women, and she has special musical abilities that allow her to interact with the ocean. So a lot of people are scared of her, but she's very bold and confident, even if she doesn't always feel that way. She projects that. and she's able to like make her own way and do her own thing. Very funny. She likes making fun of Serapio, but in like a nice way. So I really like her for that, I guess. Book that made you cry. So I can't just keep saying Black Sun for all of these, so I'm not gonna say that. I'm going to say Solutions and Other Problems by Ali Brosh. Ali Brosh is a graphic memoirist. She writes about her experiences with mental health, and she also makes that very funny, and she has a specific art style. The way that she draws is kind of goofy because like the people are like little triangles and circles. It's almost like my style of drawing, except if I were to draw what she draws, I wouldn't be able to do it as well as her, I'm sure. But Ali Brosh has this way of juxtaposing the silly and the absolutely tragic in a way that makes you realize that life is just sort of a big jumble of a bunch of different emotions. She can talk about how she argues with her 5-year-old neighbor in one sentence, and then the next she talks about her sister who was hit by a car, and I don't know how she does it, but she manages to transition between those things pretty seamlessly. She's one of the best writers about loneliness and just the suffering of having to put up with yourself day after day of any writer that I can think of. And so occasionally I did tear up while reading her stuff. And this year has been so hard for people. I think that it was kind of therapeutic to sort of see somebody who just knows that it sucks. So that's what I liked about her book. Book that made you happy. So I haven't read a lot of like really happy-go-lucky books lately, and the ones I have read I feel like I haven't liked that much, but one that I did like, although it has dark moments, is Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I also talked about this in my most recent wrap-up. This one takes place in 1920s Mexico, which is a super, super fun setting. Just any jazz age is just so fun to read. And it's about a girl named Cassiopeia who is on a journey to help restore an indigenous god, Hunkame, to the rest of his body, which has been stolen from him, so he can take his underworld kingdom back. I loved traveling all over Mexico through the book. I loved seeing the different settings. I love the relationship between Cassiopeia and Hunkame. I think that their dynamic is so interesting. And I also love the descriptions of the underworld. It can be creepy and unsettling, but it's also very beautiful. And so you sort of understand the desire that Hunkame has to be restored to it. So even though this is pretty dark and it can get serious, I think that there are so many fun moments in it, and so it did make me happy to read it. Most beautiful book you've bought this year? Well, that is easy. Definitely The Language of Thorns by Leigh Bardugo. I did a whole video on Leigh Bardugo's book, so I'm not going to go into detail about how gorgeous this book is, but the cover's great. I just showed it to you. There are beautiful illustrations like this one. Isn't that great? Isn't it awesome? And also, the book does this really interesting thing where with each short story, it starts with a small detail, like illustration in the corner of the page, and then it gradually adds illustrations as the story goes on, and then it ends up with like a full 2-page illustration. So yeah, that was an easy one. Finally, what do you want to read by the end of the year? Now that I've finished up the Women's Prize shortlist, I think I want to move on to the Hugo Awards shortlist, so I'm starting on that now. The Hugo Awards are being announced in December, so I've still got a little bit of time. I also plan to read all books by women in translation for Women in Translation Month in August, so I will be announcing a TBR for that in a few weeks. I guess that'll be all for this year's mid-year book freakout tag. There it is. There are so many books in the world to read that they deserve a little bit of freakout time. I hope that you're freaking out too. See you all probably next week, whatever next week is for you. Or maybe tomorrow, or maybe in an hour. I don't know. I'll see you when I see you. Bye.